But here's what I discovered in my training hall during those hours when it was just me and the wooden dummy, just me and my own relentless pursuit of something greater. The past doesn't actually exist. I know that sounds impossible, perhaps even ridiculous, but stay with me. The past exists only as electrical impulses in your brain, as stories you tell yourself, as emotions you've attached to events that are no longer happening. The power you've given to your past, that's real. The lessons available in your past, those are real too. But the past as a living, breathing entity that can control your present, that's an illusion. A very convincing one, but an illusion nonetheless. This realization hit me like a physical blow during one particular training session. I was practicing my techniques, and suddenly I found myself moving not with my own natural rhythm, but with the careful, defensive movements of someone who had been criticized too many times. I was fighting not the opponent in front of me, but the ghosts of every trainer who had told me I wasn't good enough, every master who had questioned my methods, every person who had looked at me and seen only what I lacked at, rather than what I possessed. In that moment, I understood something profound. I wasn't just carrying my past, I was performing it. Every day, in countless small ways, I was reenacting old stories of limitation and defeat. My past wasn't just influencing my present, it was in my present. It was directing it like an invisible puppeteer. And the most shocking part was this. I was the one giving it permission to do so. Let me tell you about the 3 most dangerous ways your past can imprison you, because recognizing these patterns is the first step toward breaking free from them. Oh? The first is the story trap. Your mind is a brilliant storyteller, constantly weaving narratives about who you are based on what has happened to you. But stories, even true stories, are not the same as reality. They are interpretations, and interpretations can be changed. The second is the emotional prison. Prison. Unprocessed emotions from your past don't just fade away, they accumulate like sediment in a river, eventually blocking the natural flow of your life force. The third, and perhaps most subtle, is the identity cage. You begin to define yourself by your wounds, rather than your potential, by your failures, rather than your possibilities. I spent months in that first training period in America, trapped by all 3. My story was that I was an outsider, forever looking in at a world that would never fully accept me. My emotional prison was built from accumulated rejections and the exhaustion of constantly having to prove myself. My identity had become so intertwined with being the underdog, the one who had to fight for every opportunity, that I couldn't imagine who I would be without that struggle. But then came the night that changed everything. I was alone in the training hall, working late as usual, when I caught sight of myself in the mirror. But instead of seeing the warrior I was trying to become, I saw someone else entirely. I saw a young man whose movements were constrained by invisible chains, whose power was dimmed by the weight of old stories, whose potential was suffocated by the need to constantly prove that he was more than his past suggested. That's when I realized the most important truth of my entire journey. The past doesn't define you, but your relationship with the past absolutely does. You can carry your history as a burden or as fuel. You can let your experiences become limitations or let them become launching pads. The choice, I discovered, is always yours. Always. Always. But making that choice requires something most people are unwilling to do. It requires you to stop being loyal to your limitations. This brings me to what I call the alchemy of transformation, the process by which base metals of painful experience can be transformed into the gold of wisdom. But this isn't about positive thinking or simply choosing to see the good in bad situations. This is about something far more profound and practical. It's about learning to extract power from powerlessness, to find strength in the very places where you felt weakest. The first principle of this alchemy is radical acceptance. Not acceptance as resignation, but acceptance as a form of mental martial arts. When you stop fighting what has already happened, you free up enormous amounts of energy that can be redirected toward what you want to create. I spent so much energy resisting my past, wishing it had been different, imagining how much easier my life would be if only certain things hadn't happened. But resistance to what is already complete is like trying to punch water. It accomplishes nothing except exhausting you. The second principle is purposeful extraction. Every experience, no matter how painful, contains valuable intelligence. But most people are so busy being wounded by their experiences that they never stop to ask what those experiences might be trying to teach them. The rejection taught me resilience. The criticism taught me to trust my own judgment. The moments of feeling like an outsider taught me to value authenticity over acceptance. But I only learned these lessons when I stopped seeing myself as a victim of my circumstances and started seeing myself as a student of my own life. The third principle is conscious reconstruction. Once you've accepted what happened and extracted the wisdom available in those experiences, you can begin the process of deliberately reconstructing your narrative. Eve? Not by lying to yourself or pretending bad things were actually good, but by choosing to focus on who you became because of what you went through, rather than on what you lost or how you were hurt. This reconstruction process changed everything for me. Instead of seeing my early struggles in America as evidence that I didn't belong, I began to see them as preparation for the unique contribution I was meant to make. Instead of viewing the rejection of my methods as proof that I was wrong, I started to understand it as confirmation that I was offering something genuinely new. Instead of carrying the weight of being different as a burden, I began to experience it as a gift. But let me be clear about something important. This transformation isn't about pretending that painful things didn't hurt or that difficult experiences were somehow secretly good. Pain is real, loss is real, trauma is real. Trauma is real. What I'm talking about is learning to separate what happened to you from what you decide it means about you. What I'm talking about is developing the skill to extract wisdom from your wounds without being defined by them. I remember the exact moment when this principle became real for me instead of just theoretical. I was preparing for what would become one of my first major film roles, and I found myself paralyzed by an old fear. What if I wasn't good enough? What if my accent was too thick? What if American audiences couldn't connect with someone like me? These weren't new fears. They were the same old ghosts that had haunted me since I first arrived in this country. But instead of fighting these fears or trying to push them away, I did something different. I invited them in. I sat with them. I listened to what they were really trying to tell me, and what I discovered surprised me. Underneath the fear of not being good enough was actually a deep commitment to excellence. Underneath the worry about my accent was a passionate desire to communicate something meaningful. Underneath the anxiety about being accepted was a profound love for the craft of storytelling. In that moment, I realized that my fears weren't my enemies. They were messengers carrying important information about what mattered most to me. My past rejections weren't evidence of my limitations. They were highlighting the very qualities that would eventually become my greatest strengths. The things that made me different, the things that had caused me pain, these were the same things that would allow me to offer something unique to the world. This is what I mean by transforming your past from a prison into a teacher. It's not about forgetting what happened or pretending it didn't matter. It's about learning to read your experiences differently, to extract different meanings, to find different possibilities hidden within the same events. Your past doesn't change, but your relationship with your past can be completely revolutionized. Now, let me share with you the specific practices that allowed me to make this transformation real in my daily life. And these aren't theoretical concepts, they are practical tools that you can begin using immediately to shift your relationship with your own history. But remember, like any martial art, these practices require consistent application to become effective. You cannot read about them and expect transformation. You must live them. The first practice is what I call the daily inventory. Each morning, before you engage with the world, spend 10 minutes reviewing not what you need to do that day, but who you need to be. Ask yourself this question. What outdated story from my past might try to direct my actions today, and who do I choose to be instead? This isn't about denying your history. It's about consciously choosing which aspects of your history will influence your present moment choices. The second practice is the wisdom extraction exercise. Once each week, identify one difficult experience from your past and ask yourself 3 questions. First, what strength did I develop because of this experience that I might not have developed otherwise? I might not have developed otherwise. Second, what insight did this experience provide about life, about people, or about myself? Third, how might this experience enable me to help someone else who faces similar challenges? This practice transforms your pain into purpose and your wounds into wisdom. Into wisdom. The third practice is narrative reconstruction. Choose one story about yourself that you've been telling for years. A story that portrays you as limited, damaged, or disadvantaged in some way. Now, consciously craft a new version of this same story, using the same facts but focusing on your growth, your resilience, and your strength. Practice telling yourself this new version until it feels more true than the old one. This isn't about lying to yourself. It's about choosing which truth you want to emphasize. The fourth practice is what I call the resentment release. Identify the person, situation, or circumstance from your past that you've been carrying the most anger or resentment toward. Now, for 1 week, spend 5 minutes each day sending that person or situation genuine gratitude for the way it contributed to your strength, your wisdom, or your character. This practice doesn't require you to approve of what happened, only to acknowledge how it contributed to who you've become. But perhaps the most powerful practice of all is what I call the future past meditation. Sit quietly and imagine yourself 10 years from now, looking back on your current life. From that future perspective, what would you want your current challenges to teach you? What growth would you want them to inspire? What strength would you want them to develop? Then live today as if you are already that future version of yourself, already possessing that wisdom and strength. These practices work because they engage your mind in a fundamentally different relationship with time and experience. Instead of being dragged backward by your past, you learn to extract what's valuable from it and leave the rest behind. Instead of being defined by what happened to you, you become defined by how you choose to respond to what happened to you. I want to tell you about a moment when all of this came together for me in a way that made it impossible to doubt the power of these principles. I was filming Enter the Dragon, and there was a scene that required me to convey a particular kind of intensity that I was struggling to access. The director was growing frustrated. The crew was waiting, and I felt that familiar pressure of needing to prove myself that had haunted me since childhood. But instead of fighting that pressure or trying to push it away, I did something different. I welcomed it. I recognized it as an old friend, a familiar energy that had been with me through every important challenge of my life. And in welcoming it, I realized something profound. This pressure, this need to prove myself, it wasn't my enemy. It was fuel. It was the very thing that had driven me to excellence time and time again. In that moment, I stopped trying to overcome my past and started channeling it. Every rejection I had ever faced became fuel for the intensity of that performance. Every moment of feeling like an outsider became power that I could draw upon to portray someone fighting for their place in the world. Every instance of being underestimated became ammunition for showing what was possible when someone refused to accept other people's limitations. The performance that resulted from this shift was unlike anything I had ever achieved before, not because I had somehow erased my past or transcended my insecurities, but because I had learned to use them. I had transformed them from anchors that held me down into engines that drove me forward. This is the ultimate lesson I want to share with you about transforming your relationship with your past. Your history doesn't need to be overcome, it needs to be integrated. Your painful experiences don't need to be forgotten. They need to be alchemized. Your struggles don't need to be denied. They need to be channeled. The very things that have caused you the most pain often contain the seeds of your greatest power. But this transformation requires courage. Courage. Hattuj. It requires the willingness to look at your most difficult experiences not as evidence of your limitations, but as raw material for your greatness. It requires you to stop seeing yourself as a victim of your circumstances and start seeing yourself as a sculptor of your own character. It requires you to understand that your past is not something that happened to you, it's something that happened for you. This doesn't mean that every difficult experience was somehow meant to be, or that everything happens for a reason in some cosmic sense. What it means is that regardless of why something happened, you have the power to decide what it will mean in the context of your life. You have the authority to determine whether your experiences will become limitations or launching pads, whether your pain will become poison or medicine, whether your past will be a prison or a teacher. or a teacher. I spent the first part of my life trying to escape my past, the second part fighting against it, and the third part learning from it. But it was only when I began consciously partnering with my past that I discovered my true power. Your past isn't your enemy, it's your curriculum. The experiences that shaped you aren't obstacles to your greatness. They are the very foundation upon which your greatness will be built. Now comes the moment of truth. Everything I've shared with you up to this point has been preparation for what I'm about to challenge you to do. Because knowing these principles intellectually and living them practically are two completely different things. Transformation doesn't happen in your mind. It happens in your choices, in your daily actions, in your willingness to show up differently in the world. For the next 30 days, I want you to engage in what I call the Liberation Protocol. This isn't a gentle self-improvement program. It's a systematic dismantling of the prison your past has built around your potential. Each day for 30 days, you will engage in one specific action designed to demonstrate to yourself that you are no longer controlled by your history. Week 1 is about recognition. Each day, identify one way that your past is currently limiting your present. Maybe it's a conversation you're avoiding because of old rejection. Maybe it's an opportunity you're not pursuing because of previous failure. Maybe it's a relationship you're sabotaging because of ancient wounds. Don't try to fix anything yet. Just recognize the patterns. Week 2 is about separation. Now that you can see how your past is influencing your present, begin the practice of conscious choice. Each day, in at least one situation, choose to act based on your current potential rather than your historical limitations. If your past says you're not qualified, apply anyway. If your past says you're not worthy, ask anyway. If your past says you can't, try anyway. Week 3 is about integration. This is where the real transformation happens. Begin to consciously use your difficult experiences as sources of strength rather than reasons for limitation. If you've experienced rejection, let it fuel your determination. If you've faced criticism, let it sharpen your discernment. If you've encountered failure, let it deepen your resilience. Your pain becomes power. Your wounds become wisdom. Week 4 is about embodiment. Now you begin living as someone whose past serves them rather than enslaves them. You make decisions from strength rather than fear, from possibility rather than limitation, from who you're becoming rather than who you've been. You carry your history lightly, extract its lessons constantly, and refuse to be defined by anything other than your conscious choices. Choices should. But here's what I need you to understand about this protocol. It's not designed to eliminate your past or help you forget difficult experiences. It's designed to transform your relationship with those experiences so completely that they become allies in your growth rather than obstacles to your greatness. You're not trying to become someone who has never struggled. You're becoming someone who has learned to transform struggle into strength. The real breakthrough comes when you realize that your most painful experiences often contain your most powerful gifts. The things you've tried hardest to hide or heal or forget are often the very things that equip you to make your unique contribution to the world. Your sensitivity, born from being hurt, becomes your superpower for understanding others. Your resilience, forged in difficulty, becomes your ability to persevere when others give up. Your authenticity, earned through struggle, becomes your capacity to connect with people in ways that surface-level success never could. I want you to imagine something with me. Imagine looking back on your life from the perspective of your deathbed. From that vantage point, what would you want your struggles to have taught you? What would you want your pain to have produced in terms of character, wisdom, and strength? What would you want your difficult experiences to have enabled you to offer to the world? Now, what if you could live with that perspective starting today? This is the ultimate invitation I'm extending to you. Not to overcome your past, but to partner with it. Not to transcend your struggles, but to transform them. Not to become someone who has never faced difficulty, but to become someone who has learned to alchemize difficulty into power. Your past is not your prison unless you choose to see it that way. Your history is not your destiny unless you decide to live it that way. Way. Your experiences are not your limitations unless you allow them to become that. Remember this above all else. The past is a lesson, not a prison. Every moment of pain contained wisdom you needed to acquire. Every experience of loss taught you about what truly matters. Every instance of rejection redirected you towards something more aligned with your true nature. Every failure revealed something important about your character or your path. You are not the victim of your experiences. You are the beneficiary of them, but only when you choose to see them that way. You. Water doesn't fight the rocks in its path. It learns from them, flows around them, and eventually transforms them. Be like water with your past. Don't fight it. Learn from it. Don't resist it. Flow with it. Don't let it stop you. Let it shape you into something more powerful than you could have become without it. Your past is not your problem. It's your curriculum, and you are both student and teacher in the school of your own becoming. The choice is yours, as it has always been. You can continue to carry your history as a burden, or you can begin to wield it as a weapon. You can remain imprisoned by what happened to you, or you can be liberated by what you learned from what happened to you. You can let your past define your future, or you can let your future redefine your past. The power has always been in your hands. Today is the day you choose to use it.